All right, let's talk about one of the most explosive and frankly dangerous political books ever written, Georges Sorel's Reflections on Violence. This thing, published way back in 1908, is so much more than a book. It's a Molotov cocktail in print, a provocation and a radical call to action that would echo for a century. So who was the guy who lit the fuse? Georges Sorel was not your typical philosopher. He was an engineer who basically called himself everything, an outsider. And he wrote in this deliberately messy, challenging way. See, he wasn't there to give you clean, easy answers. He wanted to shake you up, to make you follow his own chaotic train of thought and figure things out for yourself. Sorel's whole deal was offering this really brutal diagnosis of the world he saw around him, and then prescribing an even more shocking cure. He was convinced that society was falling apart and that the only thing that could save it was a massive, transformative shock to the system. Now, before we get to his really wild conclusions, the stuff about violence, we have to understand the problem he thought he was solving. What was this deep sickness that Sorel believed was basically rotting modern society from the inside out? For Sorel, the rot started right at the top. It all begins with his absolutely scathing takedown of the ruling class, the bourgeoisie, and the entire political game of his day, which he saw as just hopelessly corrupt and weak. So what was it exactly? What did he see when he looked around that got him so worked up? For Sorel, the problems weren't just political or economic. They were deep, they were systemic, and they were moral. And here's what's so wild about Sorel's diagnosis. He's attacking everybody. He says the ruling class, the rich guys, they've gone soft. They're cowards obsessed with peaceful compromise. But then he turns around and says the so-called socialists in parliament are just as bad. He saw them as complete sellouts, part of the very system they claim to oppose. In his mind, both sides were in on it, creating this fake social peace that was just suffocating any chance for real heroic action and letting society drown in mediocrity. Okay, so if the whole system is rotten, what's the cure? This brings us to Sorel's most famous and, most controversial concept. But we have to be super clear. When he used the word violence, he meant something very, very specific. This is absolutely crucial. To understand Sorel, you have to get this distinction. He wasn't just advocating for random chaos. He drew this super sharp philosophical line in the sand between two totally different kinds of power. First, you've got what he calls force. Think of this as the power of the establishment. It's the cops, the army, the courts, the whole government machine. Its only job is to keep the current system going, protect the people at the top, and enforce their rules on everyone else. It's oppressive. And then there's violence. For Sorel, this is the complete opposite. Proletarian violence isn't about control. It's about liberation. It's this rebellious, creative act meant to smash the old order to pieces. It's the weapon of the working class in their fight to be free. And this just lays it out perfectly. Force is conservative. It wants to keep things the same. Violence is revolutionary. It wants to burn it all down. Force is the tool of the state. Violence is the tool of those who want to destroy the state. For Sorel, they couldn't be more different. They're moral opposites. Okay, but an idea like revolutionary violence, well, it needs a pretty powerful engine to make it go. People don't risk their lives for a political theory. They need inspiration. And this brings us to the second giant pillar of Sorel's thought, the power of myth. I mean, really think about it. How do you convince an entire class of people to buy into a final all-or-nothing battle? How do you get them ready for a fight that's supposed to tear down the entire world they live in? You can't do it with a 5-point plan. You need something way more powerful. So Sorel starts by trashing what he calls utopias. You know the drill. Some intellectual draws up a perfect blueprint for how society should work. But for Sorel, that's the trap. You can debate it, you can analyze it, you can tweak it, and that's all you'll ever do. It leads to endless talk and tiny changes, not revolution. A myth, on the other hand, is something else entirely. It's not a plan for the future. It's a vision of the fight itself. It's a powerful, gut-level image of a decisive battle that makes you want to act now. And you can't argue with it, you can't debate it, because it's not about logic. It's about pure conviction. It's a feeling. So here's the bottom line. Utopias lead to endless debates and tiny reforms. Myths lead to action, to revolution. A utopia is something you analyze in a seminar room. A myth is something that gets you out into the streets. It's the difference between a textbook
and a battle cry. And this right here is where Sorel brings his two massive ideas, violence and myth, crashing together. He gives us the one single powerful example that became the absolute heart of his whole theory. He argued that for the working class to actually become a real revolutionary force, they needed their own story, their own epic, a myth that could take all their different struggles and frustrations and hopes and channel them into one single explosive point. So what could that myth possibly be? What single image could be so powerful that it could inspire people to make a complete and total break with the world as they knew it? The general strike. That was it. But listen, for Sorel, this was not just a negotiation tactic to get better wages. Not at all. The general strike was the myth. It was the image of the final apocalyptic battle, a moment where every single worker just stops. And in that moment, the entire capitalist machine comes grinding to a halt and collapses.
See, this is why it was the perfect myth. Sorel didn't care about the practical details of how you'd organize it. That's a utopian's question. What mattered was the idea of it. The vision of the general strike gives workers a sense of their own incredible power. It builds solidarity and courage. It makes every small daily fight feel like training for that one last epic showdown.
So where did all this lead? As you can probably guess, these ideas were and still are incredibly controversial. They were a direct assault on the nice, polite, compromise-based politics of his time.
The mainstream socialists, they were horrified. Sorel was basically calling their entire life's work a cowardly joke. But his playbook on how to mobilize people using powerful emotional myths instead of rational arguments, well, that found an audience. A very wide audience. Revolutionaries of all kinds started reading him, from Lenin and the Bolsheviks on the far left, all the way over to Mussolini and the fascists on the far right. They all saw the raw power in his ideas.
And that leaves us with a pretty uncomfortable question, doesn't it? More than 100 years after Sorel wrote all this down, it forces us to look at our own world. When you look at the political scene today, with all the passion and all the division, what's really driving it? Is it rational debates and detailed policy proposals? Or are we, more than we'd like to admit, living in a world completely shaped by the powerful, unifying, and sometimes violent myths that Sorel was talking about all along?